8:30 in Winnipeg. You're listening to Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. Summer is here and the first Friday of July has arrived. As always, Chris Hall from McNally Robinson Booksellers has joined me in studio to share the latest in what to read. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Simon.
Let me turn your mic on, Chris. We've certainly had you here before, but I would love to hear what you have to say. I'm sure the listeners would as well. So before we get to this month's picks, we often talk about summer being a time to catch up on reading, especially reading for pleasure. Do you find that that's the case at McNally?
I think so, yeah. People kind of get excited. A little bit of time, nice weather, whether you're up for sitting in the sun to do it or in the shade. It's, yeah. I don't know. My mind always turns to reading, but But yeah, it's. I think it's the time. It's just the relaxing that makes you think of doing a little more reading, maybe.
You know, just last week we had Maestro Julian Pellicano of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra and RWB in, and he was talking about these outdoor performances that were happening that the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra was putting on. And he said, you know, music just sounds better outdoors. Food tastes better. And I got to say, reading also somehow just... There's this added joy when you do it outside.
I think so too. Yeah.
So before we get to the picks, I do want to ask about one other thing. Mm-hmm. What's the deal with Waldo in Winnipeg?
He is somewhere in Winnipeg.
He's somewhere, but where?
It's a few places, actually, as it turns out. Yeah, we're having this fun Where's Waldo in Winnipeg promotion in July. We've got a number of participants, art organizations, museums, and theater for young people, and our two stores. Waldo is somewhere in each of those. Humane Society, he's going to be at the Fringe. So, and the idea is you go to any one of these places and you get a stamp card and you find Waldo and you get your stamp signed off, and then you go somewhere else and you explore there and see if you can find Waldo there. And when you get 4 in a row, you can hand your card in, and we'll make some draws at the end of the month for some great prizes.
Well, very exciting indeed.
Yeah.
And wonderful. What a way to explore the city, too, and engage in some community partners. And I mean, it's just part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah, and people are having fun. It's off to a roaring start.
Well, glad to hear it. So for those looking for some new reads, they've tuned in at the right time. 5 titles lined up, beginning with the latest from an award-winning Canadian-born author living in Portland, who happens to be the McNally Author of the Month.
That's right. He's one of our favorites. It's The Librarianist, and it is by Patrick DeWitt. He's, of course, well known for his book Sisters Brothers. That was a big deal and made into a movie. French Exit was a more recent one, again a movie. And this new one tells the story of a retired librarian named Bob Comet. And Bob is a solitary fellow who loves his routines. He tries to stay completely out of anything dramatic. But one morning on his walk, he encounters a confused elderly woman and ends up helping her back to her senior center where she lives. And then he ends up volunteering there. And then he has this brush with his past, and suddenly the story opens up to some past events in his life. And it turns out he hasn't been as good at avoiding drama as he might lead one to believe. He shows a real talent for attracting bizarre and eccentric characters. And that's really what the book is. It's just these amazing characters and his I would describe the book as funny, but I didn't laugh out loud. It just, maybe amusing is a better word, because I just read it with a smile on my face. It's melancholic, but at the same time, it's quite a read.
Well, I mean, you mentioned DeWitt, who has appeared on the Man Bookers, Scotiabank Giller, Rogers Writers Trust, Governor General's Awards lists, in addition to a number of others, and like you say, previous works made into films. Mm-hmm. How would you characterize his writing and storytelling?
I would say melancholy. Eccentric comes to mind, quirky maybe. Yeah, he's got a unique kind of delivery. It's very dry but he's just a great storyteller, and the characters just come to life. And I should also say he's coming.
I was going to say that. He's coming, not this month, but next.
Yeah, he's going to kind of launch our fall season. August 31st, he's going to be here. I'm going to host him, so I get to ask him some tough questions. And so if you read the book over the summer, and you can come in and ask him all kinds of things if you like.
Yeah, the 31st of August, mark it on the calendar. Mm-hmm. Well, another award winner on the What to Read list next, and admittedly, this is a title that I've been eagerly awaiting, The Return of the Character Ray Carney.
Yes, that's right. It's Crook Manifesto is the novel, and by Colson Whitehead. And Whitehead's range is extraordinary. His early books, he's all over the place. He kind of made it big, I guess, with a novel called The Underground Railroad, and then he followed that up with one called The Nickel Boys, and those are very good, but they're also very heavy.
They are.
And so then the the book after that that you're referencing was called Harlem Shuffle. It told the story of Ray Carney, 1970s New York City petty criminal. It's a lighter treatment, so he's kind of, my impression is that these Whitehead's having fun with this. It's like reading a comic book. And so Ray has established himself on the straight and narrow. He's got a successful furniture store, but he inevitably gets drawn back into the criminal underworld. He gets involved with the filming of a blaxploitation film in his store. The sentences just flow. They have a propulsion to them. It's like a little bit like watching an action movie too.
Yeah,
and there's violence in it. It's a violent story, but this violence is kind of like a comic book, like an action movie so you get this kind of, it's disturbing, but at the same time, it's not taken overly seriously. So it's this combination of things. It's interesting.
Yeah, Colson Whitehead, just such a gripping writer. And you mentioned The Underground Railroad, you mentioned The Nickel Boys, which were books that I couldn't put down. And like you say, very heavy reads. And then Harlem Shuffle was almost like a comic book is probably a great way to put it. And I like I said, I've been eagerly awaiting this title, but we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for this one, aren't we? Not quite
a little bit, a couple of weeks yet before it comes out.
All right.
So exuberant is what I would say.
Ooh,
it's
exuberant.
Like exuberant writing somehow.
Very thrilling indeed. Always excited when Colson Whitehead has something new to offer. What's next on the list, Chris?
Oh, something a little bit different. Go to nonfiction. This is called The Compassionate Imagination, How the Arts Are Central to a Functioning Democracy. It's by Max Wyman. And when this book came up on the radar at the store, my fellow booksellers immediately proclaimed it to be a Chris book.
A Chris book? What makes a Chris book?
Well, I can't deny that, yes, this is right up my alley. I feel very strongly as well that the arts contribute to a life worth living. So, I mean, who doesn't have movies, television shows at the very least in your life? And many of us have more than that. So, the irony, I suppose, is that we don't treat or support the arts very well. It's very hard, other than very famous people that we all know, to make a living in the arts. And so he argues, partly that STEM, as it's called in education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, should have an A in it. He's not alone to say that. It should be STEAM because the A is for arts, which are equally important. So he has, Max Wyman, that is, has 50 years of experience as a journalist in Vancouver and the CBC as well, and Canada Council for the Arts. So he's got a position, I suppose, to know a few things. So he's calling for a complete reimagining of the role arts and culture plays in our democracy. And given that it's so important in our lives, why isn't it supported more? And it could be supported more, both on a public and private level. It's a provocative read. So yeah, and if you're a supporter of the arts, it's worth reading for sure.
Yeah, you say to the Classic 107 listenership on this arts radio station playing classical music. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's going to pique the interest of a lot of the listeners, and like you say, that reimagining of STEM into STEAM. Yeah. I think it is a very important one. Can we take a peek at the next one, which sort of goes from Canadian identity to a European one? The idea of Eastern Europe and what that means.
Yeah, it's called Goodbye Eastern Europe, An Intimate History of a Divided Land by Jacob Michanowski. And I said back in May, if you recall, that there's a number of books coming out seemingly inspired by the conflict in Ukraine right now. Middle Kingdoms, the book I was recommending then, was about Central Europe. And yeah, this one goes a little bit more specifically to Eastern Europe. The author is American, but he traces his family history to this area. And so the journey's certainly personal as well as historical. And the most interesting part of it for me was he doesn't start chronologically. He starts by opening up the presence of various religions in the area. Because Eastern Europe, I kind of knew this, was at times was very supportive of all kinds of religions. But Christianity, Islam, Judaism were all there, as well as cults that kind of picked up on pagan customs and then mixed various religions into that. There's all kinds of things. And then, of course, after that, communism comes along and tries to remove religion altogether. And, so it's a very interesting world in terms of religion. And it was a really interesting way to start the story, because then this is like the building blocks of understanding what has happened thereafter and to this day. So yeah, very interesting approach, I thought.
And I mean, just inferring from the title, but I mean, Goodbye Eastern Europe. Is the idea of Eastern Europe something that we're saying farewell to?
Well, yeah, it's not. It was made about Central Europe too. It's not an official area
at all.
So it varies. And I mean,
what constitutes Eastern Europe?
If you're a country in NATO, are you in Eastern Europe? You know, all of these questions. So,
it definitely sounds like a provocative read and a timely one as well. So one last title, and to cue this one up, I'm going to ask you a question, and the answer should give us a title. Chris, how many types of bears are there in the world?
Well, Simon, there are 8 bears.
What a good title for a book.
That's right. Its subtitle is Mythic Past and Imperiled Future, and it's by Gloria Dickey. And I've always been fascinated by bears. It's like the ultimate nature sighting for me when you see a bear. That's like
we all do it. Ooh, a bear.
Absolutely. And it turns out I'm not alone. The book opens exploring the central place bears have had in our collective memory since time began. Indigenous folklore, Greek mythology, up to 19th century fairy tales, and the modern toy shop. It turns out there's a reason why we all spent time with a stuffed bear in our early years. So the author journeys around the world, and there are 8 kinds of bears left, and from the polar bear, grizzly bear, black and panda bears. I was familiar with those, but then there's the moon bears, sometimes called the sun bears, sloth bears, and the spectacled bear, which might be my favorite.
I had to Google it before you came in, and I've never seen this bear before, and lives up to the name.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I can imagine him sitting in an armchair reading. So
perhaps even reading 8 bears.
Yes, it could be. That's right. So unfortunately, these 8 bears are varying degrees imperiled, and the polar bear most familiarly, and maybe obviously the threatened by climate change, but human encroachment is the bigger issue for a lot of them. We're determined to build our houses in their terrain, and then we shoot them when they eat the garbage, and there's this tension between them. So it's an engrossing book. It's at once like a nature book where you learn about bears as the creatures that they are, but then at the same time, kind of a familiar tale of what human effects on the natural world are.
Well, plenty of variety, as always, in this month's What to Read. Picks that you can find up at classic107.com a little bit later today. As always, McNally, the place to go for your latest reading picks. That still includes free shipping. Actually, it was just on the website.
For the summer.
It's back on. So if you are not in town, you can get those books right to you. But why not make your way down to the Forks or to Grant Park to peruse the aisles of McNally Robinson. And again, McNallyRobinson.com, the place to go for online options. Chris, as always, good seeing you.
Nice to see you, Simon. I hope you see Waldo sometime.
Yes, I know. We got to go hunting for him. I've got to go do some more research. Maybe right after work, I'll go run out and see if I can spot him.
Excellent.